Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman.
This week on Heroic Media, Hilton Hotels announces plans to remove on-demand pornography in its rooms worldwide.
New undercover videos are raising questions about Planned Parenthood's tissue donation program.
Planned Parenthood of the Rockies was one of several clinics exposed in a recent string of undercover videos. We'll talk with the founder of a Catholic pro-life clinic located just across the street.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media. So here at Heroic Media, we discuss news headlines that deal with issues of family, marriage, and life. And the reason that we focus on those topics is because they're so fundamental, so foundational to the rest of society.
That's right. And a lot of times the topics we'll discuss are around things like abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly. So Patrick, what's our first story?
All right, in our first story, the international hotel and resort chain Hilton Worldwide took a stand against sexual exploitation when it removed on-demand video pornography from its hotel rooms worldwide. So it was kind of big news.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw it, even like the mainstream media was reporting on it, and I was surprised, but also very encouraged. And I think this is the sign of a lot of trends that are occurring, right?
Right,
People are starting to understand, because on the surface, I think a lot of people are probably like, why in the world did they pull this? What's the big deal? And the big deal is that owners of big companies like this and other companies that we'll mention later, they're realizing the connection between pornography and sexual exploitation, sex trafficking and sex crimes. And you know, all sorts of horrible things, as you know, even besides those, like we've covered stories recently about the pornography industry in general and how there's a lot of abuse and things like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. There's the sexual exploitation that you mentioned, and also addiction, which we've talked about on the show as well. So it's great that a lot of these people are realizing, hey, maybe this isn't something we want to be involved in.
Right.
In this case, it was particularly interesting. I was actually able to talk to one of the PR people at Hilton, and they said, yeah, we did this. They just had, you know, this statement, but they said, yeah, we're doing this because we listened to what our customers wanted, and we listened to what they had to say. So they're doing it in response to their customers.
Wow.
And I thought that was interesting because previously Hilton had defended its continuous sales of pornography.
Yes.
Omni Hotels and Resorts stopped selling porn in 1998 because the CEO believed that it was wrong to do so.
Right.
Marriott has said that it's phasing out pornography sales, and Hilton had previously defended it. So now this is a big change, and I think it's very significant when we're looking at the overall trend here.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And to continue, Nordic Hotels, a major Scandinavian hotel chain, they announced the elimination of pay-per-view porn from its 171 hotels. And the owner of Nordic Hotels said the following. He said, "The porn industry contributes to trafficking, so I see it as a natural part of having a social responsibility to send out a clear signal that Nordic Hotels does not support or condone this." And I liked the fact that he said a social responsibility.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's the key, right? And I love it when business owners realize that they do what they provide in their hotels and you know, in their businesses, they have a social responsibility for that. And once they understand and know the facts about what is going, you know, what is going to happen when they allow this sort of thing to be disseminated through their hotel rooms, you know, what sort of effect does that have on society? And once they realize that, you know, if they have you know, a conscience, they go, hey, we're going to have to pull this.
Right, absolutely. And I think, you know, one thing that was interesting about the Nordic Hotels, that case, which the decision was made in 2013, but the owner made that decision after he started working on a campaign that was helping the child victims of sex trafficking.
Right.
And that's where he had this eye-opening moment that said, wait a second, on one hand, over here, I'm trying to help the victims of sex trafficking, and on the other hand, I'm doing something that's promoting that, that's encouraging that. And so he just saw, and so that was what really opened his eyes, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. He saw it, and that's, I'm glad that he shared that was the reason why too, because I think it'll help, you know, when a huge hotel chain, especially one that has hundreds of hotels, or over 100 at least, says, hey, we're pulling this thing that so many people in America, across the world, are addicted to. I think it sends a strong message. It's like, wait, what? Because I'm sure that's a huge form of business for them. They probably generate a ton of revenue. And so, yeah, it's good to know, and he even cited some numbers, 1.2 million sex trafficking victims. And so it's not like a small thing. It's not a small footprint. It has a huge impact. And I think it really just speaks to society's view on how we view people, right? Do we view, pornography is very degrading. It's dehumanizing.
Absolutely.
And it's objectifying, right? And so on the surface, people don't really, I think, they don't think about that right away. People that are interested in pornography or starting to get into it, or that are into pornography, they don't really think about it like that. They think, they don't think about the consequences or think about, no, they just think, hey, I like this, it's pleasing to me, so I'm gonna do this. They don't really think about, hey, what is happening to the person in that video, or the what is the real behind the scenes thing going on with their life, how what's happening to the person behind that, the real person behind that.
Absolutely. I think it's important. Hopefully this will help expose it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to our next story.
All right.
The latest video in a series on Planned Parenthood is raising questions about whether the abortion organization is killing babies after they're born.
Yikes. So there's been a ton of coverage about this, right? It's been all over the news. It's been all over Facebook and Twitter, everywhere, right? It's been out there. And so just to kind of reiterate what's going on, the Center for Medical Progress, they did an undercover investigation on Planned Parenthood. They recorded a bunch of videos, and over like a 3-year period. And what they did was they found a bunch of incriminating evidence that it hasn't been proven per se or whatever in the court of law, but it sure seems to indicate that they are breaking the law in trafficking of body parts, basically selling body parts, which is illegal. And so they're also doing things to adjust their abortion practices so that they can get intact organs and brains and all kind, even entire fetuses.
Right. That's the one of the most recent ones that was really concerning. Actually, made it sound like some of the babies were born and they were still alive when they were harvesting the organs. And so, again, as you mentioned, nothing has been proven, and a lot of this, it's circumstantial evidence, but it's raised some concerns. There's some investigations going on. Let's take a look at what this most recent video said. It was a technician for a biotech company that was receiving the donated baby parts for research. And this woman who's being interviewed was a technician there, and she said that the baby was delivered, and her coworker called her over to see that the heart was still beating. So what she says, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this fetus, and its heart is beating, and I don't know what to think. I don't know if that constitutes it's technically dead or it's alive. And then she talks about how she was expected to cut the baby open to get the brain. And so she stopped working there. She said, I can't do this anymore. But just a really horrible story.
It is.
And I think, this is really exposing to people what abortion is, because if that same action was performed just a couple minutes earlier, is that baby any less of a baby, any less of a human person? Yeah,
and that's the confusing thing about the pro-abortion supporters, is that, just a few minutes earlier, that's a baby that you cannot kill. And then, and also it depends upon if you want the baby, right? A 16-week-old baby in the womb, one woman wants the baby. Okay, yeah, that's a baby. It's the most precious thing in the entire world. You're protected and everything. And then another woman, 16-week baby in the womb, and she doesn't want the baby. Oh, it's not a baby. It's a clump of cells. You can go ahead and kill it at any time. And then, of course, there are some restrictions like partial birth abortion, which it seems like Planned Parenthood is trying to skirt the law, because they apparently, according to the undercover videos and kind of some of the numbers that they throw out there, it sounds like they probably make a substantial amount of money. And we've covered this in previous episodes, but they give a wide range. It's in the videos, I think it was like $30 to $100 or something like that for particular body parts. But they're not supposed to sell those body parts. And then on top of that, they are not for a product. They're supposed to for a profit. They're supposed to donate them, right? And so they're clearly profiting off of them. They're selling them, and then they're also adjusting their procedures, right? So they're saying, oh, we're doing this in order to make the baby be this way, or they're doing it in such a way that they're actually doing a birth, and then they're killing the baby, right? And so for some of the things that, and the reason they're doing all of this, I guess, the people that are wanting to buy these tissues and aborted fetuses, they're doing, you know, scientific experiments on it. They're trying to come up, people try to justify this, right? They say, oh, they're trying to find a cure for cancer, or they're trying to find the next blah, 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 whatever. And so they try to justify it this way. But I think, just like you said earlier, these videos show, especially this one of these most recent ones here, right, that just the horrific nature of it. And you know, they said, hey, this baby was born, go ahead and cut through this baby's face to get the brain out, you know, and this baby's heart is still beating, and the baby's clearly still alive. It's just really sad and shocking.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And so we're starting to see some consequences to this, which is great.
Yes.
There's still the Center for Medical Progress is still releasing these videos.
Yeah.
We've seen a number of states starting investigations, the federal government starting investigations.
Yeah.
Several states are trying now to cut funding. This is really important. Planned Parenthood receives more than $500 million a year in federal taxpayer money.
Right.
That's your taxpayer money, that's my taxpayer money. So there's a really big effort now to try to stop that.
Yep.
There was a very big rally recently across the country. Almost 60,000 people showed up. We'll talk about that some more in our next segment. But I think it's really important to just keep going with this, to keep not let the narrative die. Every time there's a new video, I see Planned Parenthood trending on Facebook and or Twitter. So it hasn't lost its momentum. The mainstream media, in some respects, is kind of letting the story die. But the story is still out there, and I think it's really important for pro-life people to keep that story out there so it doesn't go away. This is a possible case of infanticide.
Yep.
This is not something that should be allowed to be swept under the rug.
Absolutely, and I think that was one of the reasons the Center for Medical Progress decided to kind of stagger the release of these videos. You know, I remember Planned Parenthood a few weeks ago was saying, "Oh, why didn't you just, you know, release all these videos?" I think it was the CEO, where she was just, you know, just talking about, "Oh, man, I wish they would just release all these videos all at once, and you know, why are they staggering?" And she knows why they're doing it, right? And it's just causing her to just not, I'm sure, not get much sleep at night, because she doesn't know what they're going to say or show or not show, or say or not show, right? And so it's I can only imagine she's got to be on pins and needles here. But I think it's really curious. You mentioned some of the states defunding Planned Parenthood. I think there's 5 now. It's kind of a continually growing number. And also, I thought it was interesting, especially here in Colorado, they decided not to file a lawsuit. You know, they kind of, I'm sure we'll see this in other states too. They said, oh, you know, the federal government or whoever is already investigating. We're going to let them see, you know, what the deal is with that. But to me, that was kind of a cop-out, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And if this is going, something like this so horrible is going on, why wouldn't you investigate, regardless of who else is investigating? You know what I mean? If you wanted to bring justice to it. So I think we need to push our you know, all of anybody that's in an office of power that can get something you know, an investigation kicked off for this. I think, you know, we need to continue to pressure them, and like you said, just keep sharing the information and keep the momentum going.
Absolutely. Coming up, we'll have a special guest who has a connection to one of the Planned Parenthood clinics in one of these videos.
Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. We're here today with a special guest, Lynn Grandin, who is the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Denver. Lynn, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
And we're going to be discussing the following story. 58,000 people showed up at hundreds of demonstrations at Planned Parenthood clinics across the U.S., and they showed up to support their plan to defund Planned Parenthood. In light of the recent undercover videos which showed Planned Parenthood illegally selling baby body parts. So, Lynn, you are the founder of an institution here that's right across the street from a Planned Parenthood, right? It's the Lighthouse Women's Center.
It's the second largest Planned Parenthood in the whole United States, right here in Denver.
There you go. And so, I guess, first of all, what's it like being across the street? Like, what is your impression of the protesters that are outside of that clinic? I'm sure you've seen them many times.
Yes, sadly on a daily basis we have protesters that, according to David B. Wright from 40 Days for Life, are some of the worst behaved in the whole United States.
Wow.
So we struggle with that every day. They just don't honor what I'll call realizing the importance of being gentle with the female who is in crisis.
Okay.
They shout at them, they're condemning, they hold up very, very large gory pictures, and so the women get very upset and they run very quickly into the building, which we feel like is counterproductive because we want to help them.
Yeah.
Some of them will lead them over to Lighthouse, right where we are across the street, and so we're very thankful for that, but there's that dichotomy going on every day.
Yeah, it goes to show that there's a right way and a wrong way to do these sorts of things, right? Obviously,
right.
When you think of protests, and you know, especially when you're trying to defend the unborn, you think, yeah, that's a great thing, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, right? Because we don't want to leave the wrong impression.
Well, we are representing Christ, aren't we? We're representing the church, and so that means love, mercy, compassion, forgiveness, not condemnation.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's important, and I think that these protests in August that were nationwide were trying really hard to do things the right way, and
yes.
sort of to show this unifying, I think 342 cities, to show the right way, the compassionate way to protest, and to show women, we're here for you, we're not, you know, against you, we're really for you and for your child.
And the other thing that we have to remember is that they were there trying to show the mercy of God and the forgiveness of God to the workers.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we can't forget the workers that are in there. They need the salvation message just as much. And there are workers that we are retrieving from the abortion industry. And I'm happy to say one main worker from Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains has left just because of the love and mercy of God. And, you know, we hope in future times to be able to talk about that worker, but they have left, and that was a key person, and it was because of the love of God, they've told us.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's amazing, it seems to me, it's always a miracle when somebody that's in that situation, especially that deep, like you might think of like Abby Johnson or somebody like that,
yes.
that when they have a change of heart like that or have a conversion towards Christ and completely abandon their way of life that they had before, it's just amazing. It just goes to show me that miracles happen all the time.
It's
That's
true.
awesome.
The other thing that I want to really stress to all of your viewers is Lighthouse is there, but it's not just there to rescue the women. We have something really unique here in Colorado, and we call it the Continuum of Care through Catholic Charities, where we meet the woman in her crisis and then we'll care for her and her child through all of the various ministries that we have that supports her all the way through all those difficulties, all the way through till the child is 4 and 5 years old.
I see that continually, especially on like Facebook and stuff, you know.
Yes.
People that are pro-abortion are like, oh, you just care, you're about pro-born, you know, or whatever.
Yes.
You're not pro-caring for children throughout, but this is an example of how an organization like the one that you founded can help people along the way in Catholic, you know, partnering with Catholic Charities and all this.
It's a working model.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Now, Lynn, on a sort of separate note, the Planned Parenthood of the Rockies, the one right across from Lighthouse, that was one of the actual Planned Parenthoods profiled in this series of undercover videos where they show some potentially illegal things going on. What was your response to that?
Initially, when I first began to watch the video, I saw the woman standing there and I saw the hotel behind her and I was yelling, that's the Rocky Mountains, that's us. I was absolutely shocked. And as that video unfolded, we realized that they were showing scenes from there that are absolutely undeniable for what they had claimed for so many years was not happening within their building. So my first thought was, well, that scripture that says, be sure your sins will find you out. I mean, that was the first scripture that I thought of, and I you know, my heart grieved because I thought, how they're not going to be able to deny these actions anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Lighthouse Women's Center, opening especially across the street from Planned Parenthood. I know you talked about it a little bit, but what was that like? How was that when it initially opened? Was there a lot of conflict? You know, like obviously it was intentional, the location. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely intentional. For us, we call it location intervention because you can touch women at different times when they're abortion vulnerable and then they become abortion bound. And for us, we had to place that there because we wanted to rescue them even at the last minute.
Right.
Just if you can just talk to them, it's just that last minute, and we have. We've saved a lot of children there already. So we have those services there: free ultrasound, free pregnancy testing, free counseling, and then we expose them to this whole myriad of all of the ministries that are out there that support them through this continuum of care. And it's unique, and it's working beautifully here in Denver.
That's wonderful. Now, going back to these protests, the ones in August, when they're done well and mercifully and not yelling at the women, do you think that they're effective in changing people's minds and hearts? I
think one good element of these protests is the educational aspect that happens there for the people that are attending, because we get good speakers and they explain what's really happening, what the people ought to do, how they should respond, and those things are very helpful for the general public.
That's great.
So what else do you think lay Catholics can do to share the truth about the abortion industry?
They've got to get educated.
Okay.
They have to get educated on early embryology. They've got to get educated on abortion procedures and risks, and they've got to get educated on how to care for people that are post-abortive. Because right now in the United States, about the age of 40, we're seeing 1 in 4 people that's post-abortive. So these are many people in our own parishes, and so we've got to meet that need. And Catholic Charities also does that through Project Rachel, through the Regina Caeli Clinical Services, and that's a comprehensive plan to care for the healing of both men and women that are post-abortive. So it's a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing. That's some great advice. All right, thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate you coming and sharing all this information with us, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Stay tuned. We'll have another story after the break. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In our final story, a new drug to treat low sex drive in women is drawing the outrage of asexual groups.
So, interesting story for a couple of different reasons. First, the asexual group thing, and then the other is that this, and I think we should start with, is about this drug. And this drug is the first to treat libido problems in women. It's kind of clumped into like a category of like, hey, you treat sexual problems for men, but you don't treat sexual problems for women. This is the first one to address problems with women, right? And so I think that's kind of a big deal. And it's supposed to help increase libido. It's for people who are premenopausal, women that are premenopausal that have a decreased sex drive. So at one point in time, they had what was considered normal sex drive, and then their sex drive decreased, and now they need a magical pill to fix everything.
Yeah, I thought that it was also very interesting. One of the concerns about this was that there's some concerns that this was pushed through the FDA because it had been denied twice, and so there were some accusations. Oh, that there was some kind of shady stuff going on here, and that was interesting because it reminded me of something that we've covered on here before, Essure, which was a type of permanent birth control, all kinds of health problems with it, but that had been pushed through the FDA.
Yes.
And so if this is true, that this was pushed through despite side effects, once again, we're seeing women's health being jeopardized for this sort of sexual freedom. You know, who's actually concerned about women's actual well-being and health? And just to be clear, the church is not anti-sex, right? And so if you actually have a drug that is helping someone with a sexual disorder, helping facilitate the sexual act within marriage, the church isn't saying, oh, that's bad.
Right.
But if this is actually being pushed through the FDA and women's health is not being taken into consideration, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I thought was really interesting was these asexual groups. These are people who say, we don't have any kind of sexual desire whatsoever. We're not gay, we're not straight. We have no sexual
they don't have a desire for sex
at all.
Yeah.
And they're upset about this because they say, we don't want to fix it. Stop telling us that that's disordered, that we don't have any sexual desire. So that was another aspect of this story.
Right. They don't think that, to them, to their viewpoint, they're like, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just the way that I am. And basically this drug says there is a problem with me. And so they made a kind of a distinction, right? There is this health condition, right? And the abbreviation is HSDD, which basically is just you have a low sex desire and then you also have distress because of that. And they wanted to separate themselves from being lumped in with those people because they don't suffer from distress. So they just don't have a desire. And so basically, doctors will likely be diagnosing their patients with HSDD, which just means they have low sexual desire and they're distressed about it. And so this pill is supposed to fix that problem. So it seemed like they were, you know, it seems like every other day there's a new classification of people that has some sort of sexual orientation. And this is, I have not heard of this particular classification, but this is another group. And so they are basically saying that it would be kind of like a form of discrimination is kind of what I got out of it.
Right, and it's interesting because one of the leaders in the asexual movement said, I feel like it perpetuates the mentality that sexuality and sexual desire is normal. Mm-hmm. And that's a really strange thing to say. Sexuality and sexual desire is normal.
Yes.
And this just sort of shows that we're at a point where sexual orientation and sexual desire, all these things can be so loosely defined and redefined that there is no normal.
Right.
And people can't even just say objectively, actually it is normal to have a sexual desires. That is a normal thing. We are human beings. That's how we're built.
Yeah.
So I think there's a very flawed anthropology underneath all of this that's kind of showing through here.
All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can check out more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode.
That's it for this week. Until next time, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.